everyone, I'm Miss Killian, and this is Lesson 7, Part 1. Let's make sure you have everything you need for learning today. Do you have your journal and your writing materials or your electronic workspace? How about the text, "We are the ship"? Great, then you're all ready to begin. Let's start our lesson by completing a welcome activity in your journals. Don't worry if you don't have the text, you can look at the image that's on the screen. I'm going to ask you to do a quick write to answer these questions. You do not need complete sentences. This is just about getting your ideas out. You're going to make connections between the illustration and the knowledge that you have gained already about Negro League baseball. So, look at the illustration on the screen, or if you have your text, you can open up to page 22. Pause the screen and answer these 3 questions. What do you notice and wonder about the illustration? What do you think's happening? And what might this illustration reveal about the way of life for players in the Negro Leagues? Pause your screen to answer that question now. Today, we are going to focus on this question. Read it with me. What does a deeper exploration of text structure reveal in third inning of We Are the Ship? We're going to continue the work we've started with reading We Are the Ship. Today, we will read third inning, and we're going to think about text structure and main ideas. How does the structure of a text influence a reader's understanding? As a reminder from our last lesson, thinking about how a text is structured helps you, as the reader, to organize the information to better understand the text. Authors use different text structures to help them organize and convey the main idea and key details. Today, we will continue to figure out what Nelson uses for his text structure. Today we're diving into third inning. I'm going to read the chapter title and quotation, and as I do, I want you to think what this chapter is going to be about. Third inning, life in the Negro Leagues. It was a rough life. Ride, 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 and ride. Hilton Smith, pitcher. Thinking about that and the 2 additional illustrations I have on the screen, what do you think life might have been like for the Negro League players? Pause the screen and think about that answer. We're going to get more into it throughout our lesson today. So let's begin with a video of Kadir Nelson himself reading aloud the first page of third inning. That's page 23. As he reads, pay attention to what life was like for Negro League baseball players. You can open up to page 23 if you have your text. Okay, remember, as you listen to Kadir Nelson read, think about what life was like for the Negro League players.
Third inning, life in the Negro Leagues. And each chapter starts off with a quote, and this one is from Hilton Smith, a pitcher. And this quote was, "It was a rough life. Ride, 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 and ride." We played in a rough league. We had a number of really unsavory characters, like Charleston or Judd Wilson, to contend with, as well as pitchers who didn't have a problem thrown at us. But that was something we had accepted as part of the game. I think what made our time a bit harder than most is what we had to deal with in addition to that. White fans would call us names and throw stuff at us on the field. And we couldn't say a word. In some places we traveled to, we couldn't get a glass of water to drink, even if we had the money to pay for it. And back then, water was free. We did an awful lot of traveling, mostly in buses. They were nice buses to begin with, but they weren't the kind that were made for riding every day. We ran those poor buses ragged. Many a time we'd ride all day and night and arrive just in time to play a game. Then we'd get back on that hot bus and travel to the next town for another game, often without being able to take a bath. And I gotta say, that cramped bus would get pretty ripe on some of those summer nights after a doubleheader. Phew, this was all season long. All of that traveling would wear on you. Many times the only sleep we got was on the bus. But that could be hard because we had to take the back roads to get to some of those little towns. And they were so bumpy they'd have us bouncing around the bus like popcorn on a hot stove. Fastest we could go was about 35 to 40 miles an hour. If the driver got sleepy, a couple of the guys on the team would take turns driving the bus. To pass the time, we played cards or sang old Negro spirituals or barbershop numbers. Just about every team had a quartet. They'd be our entertainment for most of the way. Some guys really could sing. Most people don't know it, but Satchel Paige had a wonderful singing voice, and so did Buck Leonard. We would listen to them and try to join in.
So what did you learn about life as a Negro League player from the video? Were your predictions confirmed? Now we're going to discuss the text structure that Kadir Nelson used on page 23. That means how he organized the text. In our last lesson, we began talking about a few different text structures, and we wrote this definition of text structure in our journals. Do you remember that? As a reminder, text structure refers to how information within a text is organized. What were those 3 different types of text structures we started to discuss in our last lesson? Did you say any of these? If so, give yourselves a round of applause. Comparison and contrast, descriptive, and chronological text structure. Those are the 3 we began to talk about in our last lesson. Here are my notes. Your notes could have looked like this. Open them now to where you listed those 3 types of text structures. If you want to add to your notes, you can. We said for comparison and contrast structure, this is used when describing similarities or differences between 2 or more things. We also spoke about description. This is used to create a clear picture of a topic in the reader's mind. It uses descriptive language or sensory details. The last one was chronological order. This is used when giving information about the order in which events occurred. If you need to, add to your notes now. So let's think about this. How does Nelson structure or organize information on page 23, what we just heard him read aloud, to describe life in the Negro Leagues? If you have your text, you can open to page 23 now. If you don't worry. I'm going to put it on the screen for us to use. Reread page 23 and think of what text structure does Nelson use to structure or organize information on this page. I'm going to zoom in so that you can see the text better. Pause the screen so that you can reread it now. Did you figure it out? Well, he uses a text structure that we haven't talked about yet. This text structure is called problem-solution text structure. It's when an author introduces and explains a problem and then gives one or more solutions to solve that problem. You can add this image and the definition of problem-solution text structure to your notes page. Do that now. Pause the screen so you have enough time. Let's go back to page 23 and let's see how Nelson did that. So you reread it and you thought about what text structure did he use. Now you know about problem solution. Do you see how Nelson posed a problem and then offered solutions? Down here, I'm going to show you where he does that. So, he talks about it being hard to sleep on the bus. Okay? And then he offers a solution. If the driver got sleepy, a couple of guys on the team would take turns driving the bus. He poses the problem where he talks about this being difficult because they only got sleep on the bus, and then he offers a solution. This is an example of an author using problem-solution text structure. Now we're going to read the rest of third inning. Just like in Lesson 5, you will have a focus for your annotations. You will annotate details that show what life was like in the Negro Leagues. Be sure to continue to identify some of those problems or challenges and how they were dealt with throughout the chapter. If you have your text, you may annotate or use sticky notes directly in the book. If not, I'm going to read the text aloud, and you can pause the screen as needed to record your annotations about life in the Negro Leagues. If you're reading along with me, make sure you pause it as you need to. Let's get reading. Third inning, life in the Negro Leagues. I'm going to go and I'm going to start on page 24. Traveling was even rougher down south. They didn't take too kindly to black folks down there, especially if you were from up north. We would have to travel several hundred miles without stopping because we couldn't find a place where we could eat along the way. It's a hurtful thing when you're starving and have a pocket full of money but can't find a place to eat because they don't serve Negroes. And you could forget about trying to use the restroom in those places. You would just have to hold it or stop the bus and do your business in the woods. We had to get used to it. After a while, we learned which places we could stop at and which ones we couldn't. They didn't have any fast food places back then. Many times, we wouldn't get food to eat before a game, and if we did, it usually wasn't much. We would have to play a double header on only 2 hot dogs and a soda pop. A double header means 2 games in a row. If we couldn't buy food from a restaurant or a hot dog stand, we'd stop at a grocery store and get some sandwiches or sardines and crackers. Sometimes those grocery store clerks didn't want to serve us either. One time, a store clerk told us to put our money in an ashtray if we wanted to buy something. He grabbed the money out of the ashtray and put the change back in it. He didn't want to touch our hands, but he sure did touch that money. I guess he had to draw the line somewhere. Just didn't make any sense. Pause the screen now and think about those annotations that show what life was like for the Negro League players. Okay, let's keep reading. I'm on the second paragraph of page 24. It was segregated in the North, too. They wouldn't serve us inside a restaurant, so we had to get food from the back door and eat on the bus. We'd send one guy to buy food for the whole team. Okay, so right there, I'm going to think aloud about this. I see that Nelson has introduced a problem, and he's offering a solution for that problem. That's how the text is structured. Let's keep reading. See if you can notice where that happens too. Hotels were segregated too. Many times we would get to a town after riding all day, only to spend a few more hours searching for a place to stay. The minute we arrived, inexplicably, every hotel would be full. If we couldn't find any place to stay, we would have to sleep on the bus. Some of the smaller clubs slept crammed in their cars or even in the ballpark because they couldn't afford to stay in a hotel. Some teams slept at the YMCA, the local jail, even in funeral homes. In cities, we stayed in Negro hotels or Negro rooming houses. We slept 2, 3 guys to a bed. That's all the team owner could afford. A number of the Negro hotels were very clean and neat, but more than a few times we'd run into those places, and I won't call out any names, that had so many bed bugs you'd have to put a newspaper between the mattress and the sheets. And then in other places, we had to sleep with the lights on because the bed bugs would crawl all over you when the lights were out. Can't sleep with a bed bug on your leg. I don't care how tough you are. In small towns, we'd stay with local families. During the game, the manager would send someone to find people who would put us up for the night. By the time the game was over, we all had places to stay. Sometimes the colored church would fix us a meal, and I'll tell you, that was some good eating. If we got to a town and we had a little time to kill, we'd go fishing or catch a movie. Back then, the movie ticket only cost about 25 cents, and you could stay in the theater all day if you wanted to. We had to go through the back entrance, though, because they only allowed Negroes to sit in the balcony. There would usually be 3 levels in the theater, and the white audience would sit at the bottom. That whole middle section would be empty, as if the owners wanted us to be as far away from the white audience as possible. That kind of thing seems silly today, but that's how it was back then. We played about 80 to 120 games during the regular season. The major league teams played about 154. The rest of the time, we would barnstorm, which basically means that we played just about anybody and everybody who wanted to play a game, whenever and wherever we could get one. We barnstormed against professional and semi-pro teams all over the North, South, West, and Midwest. Sometimes we'd play 2, 3, or even 4 games in one day. For league games, we charged $1 for the bleachers, $2 for the grandstand, and $2.50 for box seats. But in those little towns, the admission was just 50 or 75 cents, and 25 cents for kids. We would average about $15 to $20 per player per game. That wasn't bad money. In those days, you could do a lot more with a quarter than you can do these days with $1. On some of those barnstorming trips, the small ball clubs slept on the side of the road in tents and had to catch their own food. The competition wasn't always very good in those little towns either. But we had to be careful not to run the score up so high that we wouldn't be invited back. I want you to pause now and think about what annotations can you make about life for the Negro League players. On one occasion, Buck Leonard and his team couldn't play after they had traveled all day to get to this little town. When they got to the ballpark, they found out the Ku Klux Klan was marching there that night. They got back on the bus and blew out of there. I'll tell you what, back then when the Klan was marching, Negroes went inside, turned out the lights, and pulled out a Bible. Barnstorming through the South was nice at times. When we played in small black towns, people always treated us like it was a special occasion. For them, it was a big deal when a Negro League team came to town. It was like a family reunion. They would barbecue and play music. We had a grand old time. After the game, we'd go eat some of that good food and hang out with those nice folks before we had to jump on the bus again. It was in those towns that we find a lot of new ball players, too. They'd be playing wearing some old heavy shoes and raggedy uniforms, but many of those kids could throw like the devil and hit the ball a country mile. If they looked good enough, we'd bring them along with us. Had to make sure it was okay with their folks first, of course. We would also find new recruits when we played Negro college teams. In fact, that's where we found many of our rookie ball players. A good number of the guys in our league were college educated. We played on some of the worst fields you could imagine. Once in a while, we'd play in a small town where they had just made the ball field the same day we got there. Some old pastor. You had to pray the ball wouldn't land in some cow stuff. Some were so patchy, grass here, dirt there. Some didn't even have grass, and some were hard as a rock with pebbles all over the place. You were always worried about the ball taking bad hops. Can't get to be a great fielder in those conditions. A few of our big Negro teams had their own parks, but most teams rented the big league ballparks when the major league teams were away. Those big league teams made good money renting their parks to us. But don't you know that after paying them all that money to play in the ballpark, we still had to suit up down the street at the local YMCA or someplace else because they didn't let us use the locker room. To suit up means to get ready or to get dressed. Makes you mad to hear players today squawk about jet lag and all of this. Try sleeping in a car with your knees to your chest, crammed with 8 other guys, only to play a game the next day. Players today just don't know how bad it could be. We look back and wonder, how did we do all of that? It's simple. We love the game so much, we just look past everything else. We were ball players. There was nothing we would have rather spent our time doing. Okay, pause the screen and make sure you have your annotations. So what did you annotate? If working with someone else, share your annotations now. You can also skim through them and think about what annotations you wrote if you are not working with someone else. Let's look at some of my annotations. I'm going to show you them under the document camera. So you can see some of my annotations. I'm on page 23. And on page 23, I have noted this paragraph down here. I'm thinking about the annotation question that I gave you. To annotate for what life was like for Negro players. I noted in my annotations how it was difficult to sleep on the bus and how they needed to rotate drivers. That's one of my annotations. If I turn to page 24, I have some more annotations. I noted that first paragraph. There, I thought about a difficulty, a problem that the Negro League players faced. They had a hard time finding a place to eat in the South. And I found some evidence for that many times they wouldn't even get to eat before a game. They found some solutions to that, though. They had someone, if we couldn't buy food from a restaurant or a hot dog stand, we'd stop at a grocery store and get some sandwiches or sardines and crackers. So there's an example of how they found a solution to that problem. On page 24, I also noted this paragraph down here and how some teams didn't have a hotel to stay in. And because of that, they had to find a solution. Sometimes they would sleep several players in one bed. It didn't seem like it was the most comfortable of situations. Did you come up with some of those annotations? Or maybe you had some different ones. We just did a lot of work, reading and analyzing third inning. Way to go! This next part is going to be easy because of all the work we've already done. We are going to continue, as we've done earlier in this arc, to jot down main ideas about the text and about the chapter, and then think about the text structure. So you should open your notes and find the chart you made, the table, with first inning and second inning, where you recorded the main idea and the text structures. Find that page in your notes now. Got it? All right. So now you're going to make a third section, and you're going to title this one Third Inning, Life in the Negro Leagues. Okay? Pause the screen to put a third section with that chapter and title. Do that now. Now we're moving to the second column, main idea. On your own, think about what this chapter, third inning, was mostly about, and write a main idea statement to answer that in the second column. Pause the screen and do that now. Got it? All right, great. So what was third inning mostly about? Here's what I put. There it is. This is mostly about the way Negro League players played the game and the differences between the Negro Leagues and the majors. Did you come to a conclusion like that? Great. I also included that life posed many challenges. There were so many I couldn't even record them all. And that they also had to find solutions to all of these unique challenges that they faced. Be sure that you have a main idea recorded in that second column for third inning. So now the next thing we're going to do is text structure. I want you to think about your notes. We've already talked about this a little for page 23, but all those additional details you have now. Consider whether the structure we identified earlier, problem and solution, is the same structure for this whole chapter. Think about that now. What'd you say? Yes, I agree. I think it is problem and solution mostly throughout this chapter. Each chapter is building our knowledge of the Negro League baseball teams, and Nelson used problem and solution text structure in this chapter to help us do that. He described a problem, such as not finding a place to sleep, and then he described how the player solved that problem, okay, such as sleeping on the bus. So copy this text structure into the third column of your chart for third inning. All right, we're moving on to our check for understanding today. This is where you have the opportunity to compare and contrast text structures across chapters. Okay, so in your journal, find a blank sheet of paper, and you are going to answer this question. How is the structure Nelson uses to organize ideas in second inning similar to or different from the structure he uses in third inning? So you're going to need your notes page where you recorded second inning and third inning like we just did. Okay, so you want to look at that. And then you can use this sentence frame that I have down here. In the sentence frame, you can write what's in bold, any of these pieces here that are in bold, and then you will answer and fill in where it's yellow highlighted. Okay? So, the structures Nelson uses to organize ideas are they similar or are they different? In second inning, Nelson uses, and then I want you to fill in what type of text structure he uses in second inning, okay? And then, so you're filling this one in. And what does he use it to show? You're going to include that as well. He does this by, that's the strategy, And then you're going to go into third inning. In third inning, Nelson uses, again, you're going to list that text structure. What does he show with that text structure? And how does he do it? All right? So on your clean page, you are going to answer this question. Use the sentence frame to help you ensure you get all the pieces that you need. Pause the screen now. Use your notes to help you answer this question. Okay. Did you get it? Great work. I'm going to post a response on the screen that one of my students did, and we're going to read it over and check her response to see if it clearly identifies the text structure in each chapter and if she explains how the text structures support comprehension. All right, so let's look at her response. Oops. All right. This is the first part of her answer. You are going to read it on your own, and you're going to think, did she identify the text structure in the chapter? And did she explain how the structure supports comprehension? So read it now on your own, and let's see if she did those two things. Go. Yes, she identified the text structure in this chapter. She said that in second inning it was, say it with me, yes, compare and contrast. And then she went in to explain how the structure supports comprehension. Let's see if she did it for the second part of her answer, for third inning. All right. Read it on your own. Think about, did she identify the text structure and explain how it supports comprehension? Yes and yes. She identifies this text structure as, what did she identify it as? Problem solution. And then she explained how the structure supports comprehension. All right, so guess what? You get to check your own work now, doing the same thing we just did with hers. Look at your written response and first think, did you identify the different text structures in second and third inning? And then, did you explain how each of those text structures supports your comprehension? Check your work. Pause the screen to revise if needed. All right, great work today, everyone. To finalize our time together, we're going to reflect back to this focusing question. How can sports create opportunities for change? We've been through 4 chapters in our text, and I think we're getting closer to being able to answer this question. What opportunities for change do you think Negro League players recognized? Dig into your brain and see if you can answer that question. Keep your thoughts in your mind for our next lesson as we keep building to be able to answer that. In our next lesson, we're going to extend our understanding of paraphrasing, and we're going to experiment with paraphrasing. As always, if you have any questions, you can email me at info@greatminds.org. I enjoyed learning with you today. Thank you, and have a great day. I'll see you next time.